don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to CBS Reporters Roundtable. I'm John Dickerson. We haven't remade the set. We're all down here in soupy Orlando, Florida, where the Republicans just had a debate last night and where Republican activists are joining for a series of different conventions. I'm joined by CBS's own Jan Crawford and James Hohmann of Politico. Jan, I want to ask you about the debate last night. What's your first reaction?
The first reaction was that Romney, the former frontrunner, won. Rick Perry was tested. He stumbled. Romney, on the other hand, showed that he's done this for a long time. He was in command. I think he looked like he owned that stage. It was not a good night for Rick Perry. It was a good night for Mitt Romney.
James, let's talk about Perry's difficulties. What was his problem last night?
There was a piling on that he just wasn't prepared for again. He was attacked on immigration, on Social Security, on his book, on the HPV vaccine. He's just not comfortable taking criticism from his right, and he also isn't really prepared to be on the stage. He's had more debates now in the last 3 weeks than he's had in the last 10 years, whereas Mitt Romney has had dozens because he ran for president 4 years ago, and he also isn't very good in the second half of debates. Last night was a 2-hour debate, and he got noticeably worse in the second hour, and he looked tired and didn't look presidential.
And he looked like he needed an energy drink
right
in that second half. Jan, what do you think was the biggest liability for Perry, or is it just a general sense that he's not ready for prime time here?
I think both. I think overall the impression was that he did not even on softballs knock them out of the park. I mean, obviously the big rap on Mitt Romney is that he's a flip-flopper. Rick Perry had the chance last night to nail him on any number of issues where he's changed positions, where Romney's changed positions. He was meandering all over the place. I mean, that one really fell flat. But I think also the general impression that Perry is not responding to these attacks. He's not answering the questions. The word here last night that I heard was that people who watched this debate here came away thinking Romney was the stronger, that Romney wants, many people even changed their minds. And then there were a couple specifics where I think Perry's going to really have to answer on his HPV question. There were a couple of others where he either wasn't direct and forthcoming, or he just ignored the question on some pretty serious allegations.
Well, and that point you make when he had notes written, obviously, because he was referring to them about attacking Romney for his various flip-flopping. And he looked down at his notes and tried to read them, and it came out a jumble. I mean, if you read the transcript, it's all over the map. James, I want to ask you about this HPV vaccine thing. What's his problem on that? I mean, we know that this is something conservatives don't like. It was a mandate, but he also got into additional trouble last night, right? Because he claimed, well, you tell us what happened.
So what happened was last week, that was sort of the unexpected story of the debate. Everyone a week ago had expected Social Security to be dominant, and Michelle Bachmann came out swinging against Perry. He was caught off guard. His answer was a few years old, frankly. He's changed his position on the issue, so he looked really bad. This week, he had very carefully prepared an answer. He was in good shape until he stretched the truth at the end of the answer and said that he had been lobbied by a 31-year-old woman who had stage 4 cervical cancer. In fact, it had been reported last week that that woman never met Rick Perry until after he had signed the executive order and until after it had become a massive political liability for him. So pulling her into it, personalizing it like that, has now backfired on Rick Perry.
And this was considered by many last night to be one of the more effective moments for Perry in the debate, when he used this personal story to explain why he had made a decision that is an anathema to most conservatives, that you would tell parents they have to take their 12-year-old daughters, they are required to get them vaccinated for sexually transmitted disease. Hugely controversial. Perry comes up and says, but you know, this was about life and I was lobbied, like you said. Well, now the Perry campaign is coming out last night saying, well, that's not actually right. That is a problem for Rick Perry.
We're treating him like the piñata that he says he is, but he is the front runner, and there is a lot of concern when you talk to voters. One more point about Perry. He mentioned in the conversation about immigration, he was hit again about lower tuition for the children of undocumented workers, and he said something when asked about that. He said he said that people disagreed with him, essentially didn't have a heart.
Yeah.
That seemed like another unforced error.
It's one of those things where you don't know if that was a prepared line. You have to imagine it was not. Just like a week ago where he said, with talking about HPV, I can't be bought for $5,000. That's insulting. Perry caught a lot of people in the crowd off guard. Even his opponents sort of had a chagrined look. And in dial testing, we're told, was really bad with conservatives who he needs. That's his base of support in the party.
Right, because it wasn't just an issue disagreement. It was basically saying, those of you who disagree with me, there's something wrong with your soul.
Well, and this, I think, is a communication problem for Rick Perry that we've seen going in. He, on the stage anyway, and again, of course, this is not his natural format, he almost has a swagger that, this is my decision, I made it, and if you don't agree with it, you're wrong. And not only that, but last night, you don't have a heart. That is not an effective way to bring in conservative voters, particularly on issues like immigration, which also they care very deeply about. And I think that's why last night we saw Romney start to pick up some more ground, even though he doesn't necessarily appeal to those conservatives any either.
Well, that's the point. And what's interesting is Romney, he talked several times about the middle class. That's not a pitch to conservatives. That's a pitch to this question of his electability. He was before the debate, he had an interview with USA Today in which he talked about, I can beat Obama. Tim Pawlenty, his surrogate, was in Politico writing, he can beat Obama. What else did you see in Romney's performance that made him look like a president here last night on stage?
Romney was confident. Like I said, he looked like he owned that stage, and he was specific. He looked like he had a clear command of the issues, not only on jobs, but on a range of things, including foreign policy, where Perry really fell short. Perry did not offer any specifics, even on programs that he has attacked, like Social Security. When you're saying that Social Security is a failure and you're suggesting it should be returned to the states, you need, if you're a presidential candidate, to be able to explain to voters on something like that what it is that you would do. What changes would you make? And he's been unable to do that. And that is a central issue for him, and he knows it. As you said, he knows he's going to be getting some questions on Social Security.
Right.
And if I could just add to what Jan's great point about the swagger that he brings to the stage, where he kind of caught off guard, what that speaks to is the difficulty in translating what works in Texas to the national stage. And this is a guy who's been a governor. One of Mitt Romney's top advisors, Ron Kaufman, told me last night that Rick Perry looked like a great state Senate candidate, but not a national candidate. And you saw that also on the Afghanistan answer when he was when he was asked about Pakistan and what he would do if he got the 3 a.m. call. He really bumbled that, and it showed.
Yeah, he started talking about India, which
right. It was not the question,
and not necessarily the right.
And the way he answered it just gave the impression that he hasn't thought deeply about these global issues that you would have to deal with as commander-in-chief, but not as governor of Texas.
And the question about Pakistan, the hypothetical he was asked, reminded me of the exact same or very similar question that Barack Obama was asked in the 2008 campaign. If you've heard that there were al-Qaeda leaders in Pakistan, would you go in even if the Pakistani government didn't want you to? And he said, yes, I would. John McCain beat him up about it, but it turns out that's what he did, in fact, in the end. Let's not forget the other candidates. Jan, who else in the second tier showed something to you, or what do you think about the non-Perry Romney fight? Who stood out or didn't stand out?
Michelle Bachmann really wanted to have a big night last night. She didn't. She was largely ignored there. She was looking for a breakout moment. I think that she was ready to go after Perry on illegal immigration. She teed up that issue, talking about how she opposed this allowing in-state tuition discounts for the children of undocumented workers and undocumented aliens. But she fell flat on that. So that gave an opening for Rick Santorum, who really picked up the ball. I think the biggest moment in terms of a dramatic exchange was between, oddly enough, Santorum and Rick Perry, and it was over this issue of illegal immigration. And he actually said to Perry, about Perry, that you're soft on immigration. Again, and going back to your broader earlier point about whether this is a broader thing for Perry, I think what you're seeing is these other candidates are creating the storyline about, who is this guy? He says he's a conservative, but look at him on immigration. Look at him on an HPV mandate, interfering with parental autonomy. Who is he really? And now with Perry unable to kind of articulate at this point his positions, that's a real opening, not only for the second tier, but certainly, again, bringing it back to Mitt Romney.
It's given Obama's poll numbers, which are now as low as they've ever been in Florida, you can't risk, it seems to me, having a candidate who's unpredictable the way Perry is.
That's not the way the Republican base thinks.
Yeah.
The biggest problem for Republicans right now is that they think they can't blow it. And Michelle Bachmann has made that argument explicit in a rally just across the street here to social conservatives yesterday, and last night, again, explicitly in the debate, saying we don't have to settle this time. Barack Obama is so unpopular that no matter who we nominate, we're going to beat Barack Obama. And we know that not to be true. The elections are ultimately not referendums, they are choices. And there's a danger that a lot of Republican activists are going to see those low poll numbers and get behind a candidate, as far as the establishment is concerned, that can't win.
Well, and also when you've got people like who aren't even in the race yet, like Sarah Palin, saying, as she's been saying this week, we've got to have the most vetted candidate. You know, we don't want any November surprises, something coming up, you know, on the eve of the general election. And I think that's the point that you're also going to hear continuing, that, you know, again, who is this guy? Where's he from? And what about all those big time campaign contributions? And, you know, Bachmann's pushing this crony capitalism thing. That again, I think, is something that Perry's going to have to be dealing with.
All right, well, tough night for Rick Perry. James, thanks so much. Jan, thank you very much. Thanks all of you for watching. Join us here every Friday at 12:30 on CBSNews.com. Have a great weekend.
If we don't expand our imagination,
Justification for being what you are.